Welcome back
Welcome.
to Connect This, where we also ain't going to work on Maggie's farm no more. So that's exciting. I'm excited to talk about a show that is chock full of topics and a wonderful guest who will be joining us in a little bit for a couple of discussion points. Travis is going to admit that he's been wrong about everything all along here, which is pretty cool. We're going to talk about a kind of a pay-to-play study, talk about some legislation suggesting that when it comes to where the $42.5 billion from the infrastructure bill is going, that it should be more and more and more rural and harder and harder to make business cases to serve those areas. We'll talk about the quirks of that. We'll talk a little bit about RDOF and whether the rules are too easy to game and whether there's really going to be any enforcement of the rules. We'll talk about redlining a little bit. And there's a couple of backup topics if we get toward the end and we've gone too fast through things, but there's just a lot of things to talk about. So we're gonna keep it tight. It's going to be awesome. Today we've got the just smashing panel. We've got Doug Dawson. Awesome Doug Dawson. CCG.
This is going to go well, I can tell.
See, I also this is the reach, which is Kim McBroadband face. And Travis Carter phone. That one actually works. So I was excited about that one. So welcome everyone. I'm excited to have you back. And we're not going to do the peekaboo because I forgot to prepare an image again. Behind the scenes, we have Henry and soon Rye will be back there. So feel free to ask questions in the chat. We'll be bringing in Claude Aiken in about a half hour for a couple segments. But we wanted to jump right in. And Travis, I just want to throw it to you because you have finished your EBB audit and you're not in jail. So that's terrific.
Yeah, and I think I owe an apology for all the nice folks over at the EBB. The audit was very easy, actually, relatively trivial. We just had a couple minor things we needed to include, just notifying people about their qualification, and we're moving forward. So it was less anxiety than I thought. Very different than, like, say, an IRS audit or something. It was.
Have you gone through many of those?
Oh, let's just say we've had some conversations from time to time. So but the EBB was it's very easy, done and over, and we're having very good success with that.
How many
That's
times
awesome.
have you escaped jail, Travis?
What's that?
How many times have you skated by going to jail thus far?
I have only actually spent one evening in Chicago in prison for when I was 18 for a disorderly conduct. That was not my fault.
Was it on a date is the question.
Oh, no, my buddy Darren decided to drink too much and I got roped into it. But it was a fascinating experience if you've never been arrested, I must say.
Well, I was just thinking, you say the IRS audit and I immediately think of was it Paul Manafort with the like multi-million-dollar like apparel, like the weird leather jacket and stuff like that. And I was like at Travis, I'm like, well, if he's embezzling funds, it's not for his wardrobe.
Oh, my $7 Lands End t-shirts, yes. Someday I will share the picture of my closet with you, Chris, by the way. And
well, you invited me to come play pinball at some point, so I figured I would just sneak around while you were distracted anyway. So
yes, it could be closet peekaboo. Huh? It could be one of the topics here.
So, actually, I realized something. I didn't introduce myself, and I didn't do a very good introduction for folks who aren't familiar with you. I don't know who could not be familiar with the three of you, but I'm Christopher Mitchell at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, and I run the broadband-related stuff, and I like to put myself on camera and talk a lot. Doug Dawson runs a consulting company that's consulted with more than 1,000 ISPs and telephone companies back in the day called CCG. Travis runs USI Fiber in Minneapolis, and Kim McKinley is the person who runs behind the person who runs UTOPIA Fiber, maybe, which is I always get the number wrong, so I'm going to say 362 cities in Utah.
Basically, something like that.
That's or
a little
16?
Rounded up, but basically, it's 18.
Dang it.
18.
18. Okay, so one of the things we want to hit on quickly, Doug Dawson. I sent around a piece because it was in Marketplace, not Marketplace Tech on public radio, but Marketplace, the the like stock trading place that does like stuff. And it was an article that took very seriously a study that claims that US broadband prices not only are falling, but since 2016 have fallen like 62%. And I was like, this is insanity. How could this possibly be true? Just from our lived experience. And Doug, you didn't laugh at me, but you nicely pointed out that it was not in fact true and that the study is deeply biased.
It's beyond deeply biased. It's absolutely preposterous. It does 2 or 3 things wrong. First, it looks at advertised prices on the web, which we all know are ridiculous. And so 95% of the people don't get to spend $30 a month to get Comcast, right? The big thing it did, though, is it compared speeds over the air. It said what was 100 megabits 5 years ago versus what does it cost to buy 100 megabits today. What it missed was all the ISPs have increased their speeds. And so, so today, if you have 100 megabits, that product 5 years ago was a premium product and it did cost a lot. And nowadays, those folks are getting 500 megabits. So they're comparing apples and oranges. And so they're comparing, an old 100 megabit price and today's megabit price. And sure enough, it looks like it went down. Meanwhile, over the last 3 years alone, Comcast has raised their rates $9. Charter's raised theirs $15. Those two again are half of the whole market. So it's a little hard for the rest of the market to have dropped their prices 110% to go.
They're paying me to take
They would have to pay you. That's the only way we could average 60%. So it's an absolutely ludicrous thing. I believe it's another one of these scams that's sponsored by the big telcos because the group who did it only works for them. That group, US Telecom, touts their study every single time. I believe that study was done just like the one we talked about a few months ago. Go hand to Congress. It gets into articles that take it seriously. And now it's like broadband prices are going down and every single American knows they're paying more. So how can
this is a study that was done by broadbandnow.com. And broadbandnow.com is a site that was created by 2 people who really wanted to take federal databases, mash them up with other sources of data, and have the most authoritative, best place to have information about broadband, whether it was who was available in what communities, and then you could sign up. And I think their business model is partially that they get fees if people sign up through referrals through them, right?
That's where they get all
in recent years, they've the quality of the work has really gone down, and to me it just I don't trust them anymore when I see stuff like this. And when I first saw this study, I was like, oh, broadbandnow.com. Like I was like, well, I found that some of their stuff was a little poorly done before, but like I didn't think it could be as bad as it turned out to be. And so we're not using them as a source anymore because it's too crazy to be making that claim.
Well, if you would have gotten your 60% discount, you could afford to pay your bet off with Travis. So, yeah.
Yes.
I do have one thing to say about what you just said, Doug, was that you said every speed has gone up in the past 5 years. Not every speed.
Not every speed, but the ones from the big guys have gone up.
No,
and that's enough. That's enough. And that's the trouble is they're comparing they're comparing 100 megabit speed from Comcast today to something from an ILEC 10 years ago.
Absolutely. But they're taking the 50 biggest ISPs in the country.
Yes.
And those are most likely in urban centers with competition. It's in a very silo study of how they're presenting it, because they're making that whole article out to be that this is happening around the country. Have we seen prices drop and speeds increase when you have competition in some of these markets? Absolutely. But is that a blanket statement to be said? Absolutely not.
No.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because one of my yardsticks is Travis. Like Travis has raised prices over that time frame, and I feel like if Travis is raising prices, lots of other folks are raising prices.
Right. He's the least likely to raise prices. That's all the proof we need. Absolutely.
Nope.
At Team
Prices are going up.
Yeah, we haven't seen our prices increase in the last 10 years. But what we have seen is that the speeds have gone up. So when I started here 10 years ago, you were talking about 50 megs for about $65, right? You're talking of that same, our base speed for our ISPs and the UTOPIA charge is at $65. So it's just, you're not comparing apples to apples, as Doug would like to say.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, my reaction to that was that I've done a little study and I found that, the 2009 Mustang has dramatically decreased in price, because I would pay much less for a 2009 Ford Mustang today than I did in 2009. So, it's not like brain science to like to mislead with like dumb statistics.
But let's not forget though that a wise friend of ours predicted $100 internet in the not too distant future. So prices will continue to rise.
Yeah. So let's move on to this is one of those things that's a little bit wonky, but I think super interesting. And this issue. Brain science may not be a thing with my brain. Apparently, there's a bill that has been put forward. This is not anything that I would say is likely to pass. Certainly not likely to be signed by President Biden, but it shows that there's a disagreement on the issue of the BEAD program, which is distributing $42.5 billion through NTIA, which is the infrastructure dollars. This is money that is meant to go to the most rural areas. And right now, NTIA has been directed by Congress to distribute it and tell states that they have to spend it entirely in areas where 50% of the homes do not have 25 megabits down and 3 megabits up, which means that if a ISP is proposing a project in an area, they draw an area on a map, and they could have as many as 50 homes or 50% of the homes already having some level of service above that. This bill, which has been supported and pushed in part also by NTCA, the Rural Broadband Association, a trade association that I have a lot of fondness for, although I think I disagree with them on this, that represents the rural telcos and co-ops that have often done a great job of building fiber in their communities already. So, I feel like, I don't know if Kim, if you want to jump in on this, but I don't like it. I think that it's already hard enough to create business models in these areas, and we should have some blended areas of service with areas that have nothing.
I think it's an absolutely like a baloney policy, right? Because I think you have the problem of what is 25.3? It's still being, how is it being reported that these areas have 25.3? And you really are making a business case of, hey, let me only give the money to these 3 homes over here. And how do you build to the rest of the community? And if it is still rural, right? And I think we have to start back, and we've like talked about this ad nauseum, is are they actually getting 25.3? And let's stop talking about 25.3. It's just a substandard kind of speed for right now. And if we're using money in 2022 for 25.3, it's just crap. Excuse my language today.
I think that's a swear word anymore. You're good.
Okay.
Doug?
Wow, I'd like to curse a lot more than that. Am I really only stuck here saying crap? Because that's gonna really
no. I mean, we've never advertised that we have a clean tag. I have many military men in my family growing up, and so I have very colorful language when I'm not recording myself on behalf of my organization.
Well, I completely agree with Kim. It's even worse than what she just alluded to, because the bill also assumes that people are using the speeds from the FCC, which we know 50% of the speeds are wrong. And so when the FCC says you don't have 25.3, and yet you go to that county and nobody even has 3 down, that they would still be excluded, because they would look like they're on the wrong side of that 50% or the 80% test. So sticking with the FCC numbers just makes the whole thing worse. That would basically allow most of the money to not be used. If that law passed, most of that money is going to fall on the floor and nobody gets to use it. And the answer is that is why he's supporting it, because he's the top telecom guy. He gets all the big telecom
Senator Thune
money. He is, and he's in a state where the rural areas already got fiber, so he's the perfect spokesman.
But this is actually, I actually think NTCA. I now think NTCA is really wrong to be doing this, because get this and be ready, your heads are going to explode. If they do this, they're just making it harder to spend that money in different areas, which means that there will be more money available to go to areas that don't have 120 in theory, right? If you make it, but because the state has to certify that they've met all the 25.3 folks. And so if they sort of skip over that, then we have more money that can actually go into these areas in some ways. So
because of that, I'm not entirely against this bill, because
suddenly
all of a sudden all the money starts going to cities because they just cut off the country area. So that they didn't think it through very well. It's very odd that they're supporting it. It's almost like maybe some of their members don't have fiber and they don't want to be overbuilt. It's
that's
odd
the thing.
I
Most of
don't
them do.
understand their support. Yeah.
Are they doing this because they don't want competition to come into these markets to serve some of those most underserved areas? And
But what it doesn't make. I mean, this is a great question. We should have Mike Romano on to talk about it because I'd love to have a better sense. I mean, they do good work, but like they're literally making it harder for themselves because like in areas where they don't serve, it's impossible to imagine that someone is going to come up and say, all right, you already serve half of these homes, but I'm going to come in and I'm going to be more attractive to a state to give money to me to build over on top of you. All of these folks are probably looking for that money from the state to finish building out their area. So
they are.
But what if they made a business case to get into half of this community, and then they could use their own capital to build out the other half to bring this like overbuilding in? I think it could happen by doing it that way. I don't know if that's why the rationale is, but I do think it's a business case for some people to enter markets if they have any kind of money to get into them, because it's giving them free money to go into new markets, and they can build out the rest that's more densely populated.
Bottom line is, this is never going to make it through Congress. So it's just one of those bills that gets us talking and it's not going to go anywhere. So.
And we really look like Travis is really engaged in this question too.
No, it's a great question. I feel like it's one of those things where Travis is just like, oh, these government people.
I was just amazed. It only took a few minutes to get to the new government thing, but yeah, it's what I found interesting. So as I was traveling from Minnesota to Arizona, every other rest stop I pulled in and I did a speed test along the way. 25.3 out in the middle of nowhere is pretty easy to get off of an LTE signal because there's no users on it, just doing a simple speed test. But again, this is all just self-reported, isn't it? I mean, there's no real accurate data.
Let's not forget that on that route you took, the cell towers are literally 3 feet off the side of the highway. You drive 2 miles off the interstate and there's zero broadband.
Well, that's what I was wondering.
Right. Travis is right. It's self-reported.
Is it just self-reported? That's what I was wondering. Well, yeah, I said this is all 25.3, so no competition can come in here.
In theory, though, it is self-reported, but it will be subject to a challenge process that the FCC will be developing. And I think that many of us have questions about how well one can make that work, but certainly it will be better than it is today. I'm not going to make a chicken wing bet on it.
That'll take years for those challenges to go through. And by the way, people can only challenge whether they have broadband. They can't actually challenge the speed. Only governments can challenge the speed. You have to look at the detail of the challenge process. You can come in and go, I don't have 25.3, and they'll go, well, thank you for your response, and they will not even.
Well, I think that's reasonable, though. Local governments, I think, will be involved in this.
They have to do that, and the way for them to do the challenge, they almost have to do 100% speed test in their county, so they're not going to be able to be serious about challenging either. The challenges are completely feckless. They will not work at all, I promise you.
Let's go back to the main point. We don't even have maps that the FCC has been working on for so long. And now we're developing a challenge process. Like, we don't even have a full FCC at this point.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Don't even get me started, because I mean, like the absurdity that Gigi Sohn might have a conflict of interest because she has had opinions in the past, whereas the other, I mean, like Ajit Pai was the chair of the FCC and he worked for Verizon, and it wasn't clear that he ever stopped. So, like, it's unreal to me.
But is this a good time then, Chris, to discuss the big question that all of our fans are wondering? Is the bet been satisfied yet or not?
I've got 3 weeks and 2 days.
That's what he said that 2 weeks ago. That he had
I was convinced that it was in March, and I watched the whole dang February. I mean, I was convinced it was in February, so I watched our February show. Last year, we only did one show in February. We're doing way better by the last few months since Henry's been running this and Rye's been helping out. Like, I mean, this is a professional operation. But like, I watched the February show, and we didn't talk about chicken wings. So then I looked at the first March show. Sure enough, it was either March 2nd or March 4th. I can't remember which, but I've sent Henry the time codes, and he is going to pull that video out, and we'll have a little reminder of it and maybe a little celebration that I've lost. But it's inconceivable that the FCC would change the definition of broadband beyond 25.3 in the next 3 weeks and few days.
Yeah.
So yeah,
possible.
Isn't it sad we're talking about 25.3? It's just crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, so okay, I don't know that it's entirely crazy. Like, okay, so let's be clear now. 25.3 is a bad definition of broadband. However, there's different numbers that we need. like there is a point at which we should discriminate when we are giving out government dollars. Like, I don't think my family should get it faster than someone who is on a 10-1 DSL connection, right? And so, like, I think 25.3 is a reasonable place to say, if you do not have a reliable, real 25.3, you know, I'd be fine if it was 26.4.5, like whatever. Like, we need a dividing line somewhere of how to prioritize people that don't have the most basic minimum. Tell me I'm wrong.
But I think you can prioritize them, but why like put a subpar standard there? So yes, I think you're right that they should get broadband first, but why not move them up to like the 120 standard? If you're
if you use that money, you do have to deliver 120.
But
and
like,
some of us commented it should be 100. So we'll see what
I think it should be symmetrical. I have all kinds of problems with this, but I'm with Travis on this. I'm like, and I don't agree with Travis on much. So.
Points of agreement. Broadband speeds, how awesome your glasses are.
I wore pink ones today too. So I mean, I'm like trying to get into like the Valentine, whatever that day is.
What's in that glass? You don't have enough ice in there. I'm like Travis.
It's sparkling water and Dr. Pepper combined because I don't like.
Oh, so I want to give Doug a chance to tell me I'm wrong, because I love learning when.
No, you're actually right. The problem is it's the self-reported speeds. You know, we just did speed tests in a county in Minnesota where CenturyLink is claiming, because they have VDSL, they're claiming DSL speeds up to 140 megabits per second. No, they don't. What they don't tell you, no, the map just shows speed. They don't tell you that only goes for like 200 feet from their central office. So they're claiming it all over the place. And so that county looks not only like they have better than 25.3, they look like they have better than 120 because CenturyLink's reported that way. They're obviously stepping up their game to try to beat the 120 game now. And so the game is not over. We're just going to keep playing this game. So it has nothing to do with real speeds. I guarantee you most of the people in that county are still getting 3 megabits.
So let's go back. When are these FCC maps are going to come out with new data from like various sources? And do you think that the states are going to come in and really put in some reporting for some of these areas too, to dictate what they're actually getting in these areas?
The states are one of the ones who can challenge the FCC maps. The trouble is that's going to take a while. The states cannot use their own maps for the BEAD grants. The law says it's the FCC maps, so it has to be the FCC maps.
So,
sorry, Kim, let me just jump in for a second. So most people have been assuming that it will take a long time, which means end of the year-ish, I think was what people were assuming. And then Secretary Raimondo suggested that she had been told by someone at the FCC that they would have information for her this summer, which is not inconceivable because, as Doug has pointed out, and I think is correct, in theory, the FCC could release sufficient data for NTIA to determine how to divide the money to the states, although that might not be enough to give the states guidance on where they can use it for the 25.3 and whatnot. So, I mean, it is possible that that's kind of what's happening.
I think that's what they were talking about. They were not talking about fixed maps. I mean, ISPs are going to struggle with this first time of drawing the lines on, and so the first iteration will be a disaster. They only report quarterly, so it's going to take forever to get it straightened out. And you're still allowed to put in advertised speeds. It's not going to get hardly fixed at all. It's actually a new chance to up your lie. So
Kim, I cut you off.
Yeah, I'm just going back. I'm with Travis. I think a lot of this money is just going to get wasted if we're not doing anything different that we haven't been doing for years on years, and we're still not building in rural areas. Rural areas are still underserved. So how is this going to change anything? And I know, Chris, you're an optimist on this. I am like very much a pessimist, and I'm
an optimist for some states. I mean, like, I'm not an optimist for 50 states. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, there's states like West Virginia that are going to be hard to make this work, and there's states that are going to be really a challenge. So yeah.
Right, and that's not a commentary. If you put Doug in charge of it, like, you would still. I mean, it's not a matter. We're not saying that there's bad people. Like, it's just straight up an incredibly difficult challenge.
It's just hard to do. Yeah. But there are states where this will solve the problem.
So I want a question for you, Doug, real quick. Where are you seeing most of your new clients come from? Are they urban centers or these rural areas that are looking for the federal money?
That's an interesting question. Actually, I'm contacted by about half and half, and the federal folks are under the impression that they're going to get a whole lot of this money. I mean, and which, because they're getting misinformation, they think they're going to just go get these giant grants out of here. And it's like, if you have cable company and the cable company is going to swear they're already faster than 120, you're not going to get any. And so there's a whole lot of misinformation out there. I mean, they're contacting me going, can you help me figure out how much grant I'm getting? I go, that's real easy, 0. And they don't like me anymore. So.
I bill at $1,000 a second. That's $1,000.
I mean, it's really not coming to cities, except in there's circumstances right in the BEAD to do stuff like serve low-income multi-tenant dwelling. So there's some money for that, but it's mostly not coming there. ARPA was the money for that. ARPA's great for cities.
Yeah, people just don't get it.
But they're spending all their ARPA money elsewhere. The cities didn't set a whole lot of it aside for most of them for broadband. So.
All right, I'm going to cut this short, use my prerogative of person who shouts the loudest, and turn us to smart cities and business models around fiber, something that Kim had brought up. Why don't you launch us into it, Kim?
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of these P3 models come out where the city maybe owns the infrastructure and they're letting somebody ride on it, or it's opposite, that they let a city come, or a big provider come in and they put some city's subsidy into it, but the private provider owns it. And when we're looking at these smart cities and why communities are trying to bring fiber to them, they're not bringing it just for connectivity. They're bringing it for the future. So one of the things I was thinking about is if you have one of these ISPs who runs and owns the network, even though they've gotten subsidies, are they going to allow these cities to put smart city applications, or does it become just a revenue stream for their smart city applications that they want to use on it and charge the city back for it? And is that a smart move for cities to go forward with?
I believe it's the second. So you've absolutely nailed it. If you let someone else own your smart city network, they will charge you a whole lot of money to use it. We've seen that for 40 years. The cable companies gave everyone a free citywide connection and then continue to milk them for the last 30 years for it.
Right. No, I think it's interesting, right? Because cities are in different positions. Now, I think, Travis, I want to bring you into this because I feel like you're not an aberration. I think you're one of a small group of companies that is interested in doing the right thing on this, in that you offered to just drop dark fiber off for the city of Minneapolis to use, and they were like, for what? Right? I don't know if you want to share that story.
Well, I think, at least my story is the city was, the perspective I have is they're relatively understaffed from an IT standpoint, and so they rely on external vendors to do a fair amount of the work. But when you run a dark fiber network, you need to build a skill set and tools and business practices that maybe they don't have. And with the other problem with dark fiber networks is they're so reliable that when there is a failure, having the wherewithal to resolve those issues. I hope Doug's okay.
I think he really disagrees with you. He's just
yeah, boy. I know he gets mad at me, but that's a whole new level. See, so I think it's tough for them. They would, at least the model that Minneapolis would prefer to have, and the surrounding communities, is they just have somebody they can call, say that let's just say the surveillance camera's down, or the shot spotter's down, or the utility, and it just gets fixed. They don't have to get too deep into the weeds on the technology.
And that's the thing that I find interesting is that, in theory, they could have that with you, right? They could take the dark fiber and they could have a contract with a vendor that would provide that service. You would probably provide that service. And I think, when I talked to we had Casey Irving on before with Clear Networks out of the Western Slope of Colorado. I think they do that sort of thing. A lot of these companies they're going to make their money from the enterprise and from the residential, and they're happy to drop stuff off for government because they're we're happy to have our government be more effective and efficient and stuff like that.
I think a lot of it just depends on kind of the business model that particular government is used to. And in the cities we work in, they have a very vendor-centric model. They rely on vendors for everything, from changing the toner cartridge in the printer all the way to their communications. It's been one of the barriers, actually, of entry for smaller ISPs to get in, is they really only want to have one company to call. So if it's CenturyLink or Comcast that's already deployed across the city, it's a very easy decision for them.
Yeah, same thing with school districts, right? They get in these consortiums that are regional, and then they want to have one contract, and it's a major problem for independent ISPs.
But I think
Well,
the
go ahead, Kim.
problem is that when you talk about some of these ISPs are developing smart city applications, so they're only going to use their proprietary smart city applications. They're going to start charging more money. And I don't disagree with you. I work for the reason that UTOPIA started doing smart city applications and deploying them is because the cities didn't have the resources, right? So we started doing it ourselves. But I do see a problem when you're looking down the road. And like Doug said, that they're making a built-in revenue stream for the next 40 years for their not their hardware and the services of what is going to be deployed. So it just concerns me a little bit, and I don't think a lot of people are really looking at it that way.
No, that's right. And I want to note that some of the examples, I mean, for instance, if you look at Huntsville partnership with Google, the Springfield, Missouri partnership with CenturyLink, a number of others, the West Des Moines model with Google and the city of West Des Moines. In those cases, the city has assets and they're able to use it. In fact, in Huntsville, when I talked with them, I asked, have you had any other major tenants come in on the fiber network to lease it? Because we predicted that we would not see robust competition on there. They said no, but the city's using it all over the place, and it's really proven to be a worthwhile investment on that basis.
And I think that what Joel said in the comments, I think it was Joel who said that they have offered free service. I get it. A lot of these cities, and I think you're absolutely right, Travis. I think a lot of cities have no idea, and they don't have the expertise, and they don't want to deal with dealing with it.
And the technical issues are so far between that it's really hard for them to develop any consistent skill in it. They're just, it might be 5 years between they see a problem, and no one remembers how to run an OTDR. Nobody even understands where are the spare optics, all this stuff. They would rather just say, Doug, go fix the camera at 37th and 18th, and it just gets fixed. It's much less hassle for them.
Did you have a problem at 37th and 18th?
I just have to say that I've been having trouble paying any attention to this conversation ever since you said Travis is not an aberration. So.
I didn't know we didn't get along either, Doug. I think Kim and I have a contention here on these calls.
I just want to note that I thought we would have a total slam dunk in terms of having us all together in person sometime at a conference, and Doug's clients have ruined everything for us because he's not allowed to do anything where he's not working, and so we could not pull him away.
I also will make an admission. I'm still a little scared of airplanes.
I'm more afraid of buses than airplanes, but we're going to move on to Claude as soon as I find out what Kim wants to talk about.
I was just going to say, I used to be the hardest working person in broadband, and Doug, you're trying to beat me. I'm not liking this competition we're having right now.
I just honestly, I'm so excited that the two of you are available on every other week basis, because I really do. You're both turning down making money to hang out with us. So that's awesome.
I'll wait to get the bill.
It'll be worth it. I'll find someone. Travis, what are you doing?
1,000 a second, I heard.
So let's bring on Claude Aiken. Claude, welcome. I forget the exact title, but you're the head of WISPA.
Whatever that means.
Right. So I wasn't sure, King, CEO, Tyrannosaurus Rex. Yes. So I wanted to bring you on because Doug had a post about how bad RDOF could be in terms of an ISP that would make a promise to build in an area and then just woefully undercommit. And Claude, you and I met when you were at the FCC, and so I wanted to get your take on it because I know you follow the rules closely. And so I don't know. Let's. I think rather than having Doug talk about it, if you don't mind, Doug, we'll have maybe Claude talk about the process of what happens if an ISP is not meeting its obligations. Under the RDOF rules.
And I have to preface that with it's incredibly complicated. So, and that's part of the problem with looking at this from the outside, and then also from the perspective of a small ISP that's looking to participate in these programs. Is there's a lot to keep track of. And
you might get audited, but it'll be okay.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that's one of the things that I'm constantly telling our members is like, make sure that you are ready for all of the back end obligations that you are going to have in terms of the performance testing, speed and latency, location reporting, all of the things that as we're talking about speed and latency testing, which was kind of the genesis of this conversation. You have to report every location that you're deploying to, and you have to have the infrastructure in order to be able to do that. You have to be able to meet certain speed requirements, meet certain deployment milestones, meet certain latency requirements. And there are different levels of penalties that are associated with not meeting any of those obligations. So it's tough to keep track of. And I think Doug laid it out as to the speed piece pretty well, but the challenge there is at the tail end when all is said and done, when you have your 100% deployment milestone, 100% speed and latency testing. If you're not paying the Pied Piper at the end of the day with all those, you're going to be hurting, because it's 1.89 times whatever you got for all of the deployment milestones you don't meet, and all of the speed and latency testing milestones that you don't meet. So it's a pretty hefty burden at the end of the day if you don't perform.
Let me counter that by not talking about RDOF at all. Let's talk about CAF2. I mean, it's because the same rules apply to CAF2. So CAF2 is where
and all the other high cost programs.
So the ILECs had to upgrade the DSL, the rural areas, to 10.1. And let's use AT&T as examples. AT&T was in 20 some states. They only actually did DSL upgrades in 2 or 3, and then they said, "Wow, that's going to cost a lot of money." So they said, "We're just going to update with fixed wireless." Well, now CAF2 is now almost 2 years over, and they are probably going to launch that fixed wireless product this August finally. And of course, who knows how long it takes to get to all their cell sites. But so for all those years, they had no upgrades in most of their states, and I have not. And then the FCC awarded them for that by giving them a 7th year of CAF2 money. That's how big their penalty was. There's been absolutely no penalties against those big telcos. None. They've paid no penalty. I follow the FCC every day, and I keep waiting to see that announcement of the AT&T.
Okay, so Doug laid out that there's not enough in statute in the rules that the FCC has adopted, and so I just want to talk about that for a second. So Doug, you agree then that if the FCC were to find that that was out of compliance, that there is a substantial fine that could be levied.
Well, the FCC has the power to take all the money back. They can levy a triple fine if they wanted to. Right,
so they could take the money back and impose additional penalties.
Penalty by math for the speed test, but then the FCC could go way past that if they wanted to. They just never have, is the problem.
Okay, so let me throw back at Kim. Sorry, just 1 second, but I just want to throw back at Claude. So we do have this example then that the FCC kind of has this history of not enforcing it, at least for the big guys, I would say, in my observation. Like every now and then they throw a big book at a small ISP.
AT&T by any means.
And I think that's sort of the issue. I think that you might say is that, and I mean, in my experience, they will throw a very big book at a very small ISP to sort of serve a lesson, and they won't do anything for the big guys. And so I'm just curious.
And that's my fear, is they'll pick out one ISP at RDOF and nail them, and everyone else will get away. Well, that's the history. So.
Yeah, and I think that's the challenge. Is Doug, you're talking about CAF2, where it basically was the giveaway version of CAF2, where they went to all the price caps and said, "Hey, we have this whole pot of money if you agree to do this," and they said, "Sure, we'll take the pot of money." And then they put in place all of these stringent requirements for the reverse auction and the Alaska plan and ACAM and all of these other things. So it is a process, and it's not perfect, but there are more teeth now in the FCC's rules than for when they were talking about it. I mean, the big guys didn't have to put up letters of credit for CAF2, the CAF2 giveaway versus the CAF2 auction. So again, we can debate the policy all day, and it's probably going to boring for the audience, but
Let's let Kim debate the policy for a second.
Yeah, like, because I'm such a policy person. But my question is, so Claude, you talk about all these requirements that they need if they get audited, right? Like they have to have this ready, which in some places for these smaller ISPs would take a resource to have that ready. But what is the chances of these guys really getting audited when we're talking about all of this? Like, how often do these smaller ISPs get audited?
well, so it's not even about the audits. You have a requirement to, like, the first obligations that hit are you have deployment. We're talking the most recent reverse auction, CAF 2. Those milestones are going to hit this year, and the Universal Service Administrative Company, or USAC, is going to know whether or not you're filing locations into their database. So if those locations don't go up, then warning bells start going off, and something's wrong. So it's not going to take an audit to uncover whether somebody is saying they're doing what they're doing, but Chair Rosenworcel has just said, and the issue comes in, well, maybe they didn't report exactly what they should have. She's saying we're going to step up audits and accountability to make sure that everybody's crossing their T's and dotting their I's in terms of putting locations in terms of doing performance testing, and all of those good things.
So if there's a red flag, then that might spur an audit, is what.
And it's random too. So you sign up to be audited by taking this money.
So I'm curious, Travis, someone who has some concerns about these different federal programs and the various paperwork and requirements to go along with them. I think how to run a network well. You don't know how to interface with the government as well. What kind of questions do you have around this? I'm
always fascinated with people that are willing to take the risk. I guess if you're unable to get traditional financing, either mezzanine or senior debt, you're probably in that bucket. But I don't know. We don't qualify in metro areas. So, I always think it's kind of ironic that 82% of the population in the United States can't benefit from a single penny of this stuff. So,
let me poke you on that, because you did get a grant from the state of Wisconsin. You're out there, and one of the comments I hear from you is the challenges of how few people you can sign up per week because of the distances and the challenges involved.
Well, yeah, we did try it in Wisconsin. We used some of their, a few dollars here and there, and they were easy to work with, but high uptake, long distances was the challenges. But it's a very doable model. But it's I think WISPs, potentially probably the medium-sized WISPs, may have a better opportunity because they probably have a little bit of EBITDA they can leverage to get financing. I just don't know how the little guys are going to sign up and actually pull this off. It's just it's too much expense for too little reward.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I hear from folks like yourself all the time is our biggest challenge is access to capital. Like we have the wherewithal, we want to do it, we want to grow, but how are we going to get the money? Which is why a lot of them are bootstrapped, and that's a limitation on the number of people that they can serve in the areas they can go into.
But
but I've also noticed with the WISPs that some of them I've met are a little complacent too. Like they're comfortable with the technology that they're in. They're comfortable with the customers they have. They're making just enough money to live a pretty nice lifestyle in the town they're in. And I keep prodding them, being like, well, you might want to invest in the future with fiber. They're like, just not willing to take the risk.
Let me plug for a second. I want to hear what Kim had to say, but I think that leads into our next topic. And Kim, are you waving me on?
No. Yeah, you can just go on. Yeah, you're good.
Okay. So, one of the things that we see is that in the two shows that you do, that WISPA does, Claude, the WISPA America, which is coming up here in March, I believe, WISPA Palooza in Vegas, which Travis has been trying to get me to go to. And if it wasn't in October, it'd be a heck of a lot easier. It sounds like a great show. There's a lot of fiber at those. And so what is the future of the companies that are in WISPA?
So I think, fiber has been a part of what WISPs have done for the past several years, and you've seen that in a lot of our educational efforts at the shows. So I think we have a lot of folks who are doing fiber. We've got a lot of folks who are traditional fiber providers and are looking to get into wireless. We have a lot of legacy WISPs that are starting to do fiber. It's just a really interesting time in the industry, and we're trying to meet all of those needs. So we have education on wireless, we have education on fiber, and I think really at the end of the day, when you're talking about the whole of the United States, the future is going to be hybrid. There's going to be wireless, there's going to be fiber, and I think at the end of the day, it's companies like Travis's and it's companies like our members that I think the local community-based ISPs, whether they're muni, whether they're private, whether they're co-op, those are the folks who are really making a difference on the ground at the end of the day. And we're just trying to support them as best as we can.
Well, I agree with that. And I'm curious how Doug reacts to that, because I feel like the future, if I had to put my money in the future of fixed wireless, it is taking on the cable monopoly in places, much like companies like Monkey Brains have done in San Francisco. Well-run, high-capacity connections in urban areas. I mean, to me, that seems like a brighter future than trying to continue to toil in the rural areas with the great distances. Doug, do you see that at all, or you think I'm...
I actually do. First off, I would just like, I saw today that Mr. Aiken is leaving WISPA. He's he's been a great advocate for them. So I think he's been an awesome person.
They found out that he was coming on the show, and they gave him a choice.
That has ruined a lot of careers. I just want you to know. But yeah, the new technology that's coming out really allows you to whether it's center cities or more like county seats. When you have the complacent cable companies in the county seats who haven't upgraded their networks for 15 years and are not delivering anywhere near 120, we do tests on them and they're delivering 20, right? I think they're really open to a really nice wireless solution. The old wireless technology just wouldn't work in dense areas. But now you've got the mesh networks that bounce from building to building. I think they have a great market there, and they don't have to spend a lot of money, and they don't have to get the big bank loans. I know a lot of them are looking at it. We haven't seen anyone really deploy it yet. There's probably a few, but I've not run into it anywhere yet. I think it's a great opportunity. I think the cable companies in those kind of towns are in trouble. We've already got T-Mobile delivering 100 megabit fixed cellular, and I already have talked to farmers and people in small towns who are buying it, and they think it's awesome. Yeah. We've got the WISPs that could do this same sort of speeds. I think the cable companies might find themselves walking away from those markets in 5 or 10 years, just like the Lex did. They're going to go, heck with those little towns of 10,000. We're not making any money here. So I think there's a great opportunity for the little local guys. So,
Kim or Travis, any last comments?
I don't know if people are aware, at Utopia, we have a large wireless provider who actually is a service provider on our network. And so they offer their wireless service in the areas that they have wireless capability that fiber might not be there. And then they have expanded their customer base into our marketplace where they can offer it fiber. So they're willing to admit that there's two technologies that work for everyone, right? And they want to offer it.
That's true just briefly, that's true in Ammon, Idaho as well, where Fibercom, which is a fixed wireless provider, is one of the key.
Aptly named.
Right.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Kim.
And like Rise Broadband is the one who is on our network, which is one of the, if not the largest fixed wireless ISP in the nation. And so it's very interesting. As a fiber deployer, we feel like there is a point for fixed wireless. We're not going to say there isn't. And to some of these very rural areas, a short-term solution or a long-term solution is to provide wireless service to those areas. Do we eventually hope to get fiber there? Absolutely. But that is something that we talk about every day. People don't think that we believe that over here. But I also think that what Doug said is very important, is that you have to make sure that they're not oversubscribed, because I think some of the smaller WISP out there who oversubscribe so badly, they give a bad name to all fixed wireless providers out there of how the performance will always be.
There's very bad WISPs. They do 6 wireless hops. They put twice as many people on each tower as they should, and they deliver 2 megabits. And the people don't buy their service. But there's also great WISPs. I mean, that's the ones who don't do a good job will not be there forever. I mean,
and I think that's some of the misconceptions out there that you hear, because you do Here, it's like when you get bad service, you're going to hear about that 10 times more than you are when somebody gets great service. So it just gives a bad.
I mean, I was just working in a county where there's like 6 WISPs, and they're all bad because they're interfering so badly with each other that nobody works. I mean, the whole market is completely oversubscribed.
I think that would be a topic for a future show. I'd like to talk more about because I do think that's one of the things that are vulnerable, which is that you're kind of relying on the FCC if you have a bad actor come who's not playing by the rules, and they can really screw things up.
One last point I'd like to make is which I should have finished. Where I think the WISPs step into these towns is they're taking DSL's place. They're going to be lower than the price in the cable companies. A lot of people only care about price. They will take a speed that's not as fast as the cable company because price is way more important. And it's 30 or 40% of the market in those towns. There's a huge opportunity there. And DSL's been in that market, but DSL's finally dying. It just doesn't work. So,
Claude, let me ask if you have any last points here.
Yeah, no, I think I think Doug's right, and that's one of the things that I've been trying to communicate to our folks is that this is the market continues to change, and people have got to step up their game regardless of what you're doing. I mean, if you're a rural telco who's been comfortable providing a 5 meg package over fiber because you're going to need to step up. If you're a WISP who's providing a 2 meg package, you're going to need to step up. That kind of service is just not good enough anymore. And with all of the funding coming in and with all the focus on broadband, the provider community the small provider community is very well positioned to take advantage and to really grow and provide fantastic service, but everybody's got to step up.
So what incentivizes them, Claude, to step up if they don't have competition in those marketplaces, in your opinion?
Well, I think part of it is that there's going to be, I mean, some of it is competition, and you can see the the situation that Doug mentioned where you have 6 ISPs in a market duking it out. The challenge there is always been spectrum access, and we haven't seen the FCC really take into account the needs of small local providers when they're divvying out spectrum, which is why a lot of folks have built their networks on unlicensed. I mean, even going on the spectrum soapbox, you talk about the CBRS band, which was supposed to be done in really small areas, which would have allowed lots of smaller entities to get a lot of protected spectrum so they could provide fantastic service. The big guys got a hold of that, and it became out of reach for a lot of the small mom and pop operators. But it's competition, it's pressure from the outside, it's pressure from customers, it's a variety of different things that will cause folks to step up their game at the end of the day. But it has to be a partnership. It has to because you got to remember, a lot of these folks got into the game because of a lack of good connectivity in their community, and they're doing the best they can with the tools that they've been given, which is very little. It's somebody borrow $10,000 from your dad to set up your wireless network because all you've got is high latency satellite. That's going, and you don't have access to capital or spectrum. That's going to impact the kind of service that you're able to provide. And we've seen some amazing things done from that. But at the end of the day, it's going to be pressure from consumers. It's going to be pressure from government. It's going to be pressure from competition that really causes folks to step up. But the best way to do it is provide the resources so that folks can actually take those tools, take the capital, take the spectrum, and do a better job at the end of the day.
Thank you, Claude. Looking forward to having you back in the future. If you, I don't know where you're going, but if you're ending up in a place where you're allowed to consort with me.
Oh yeah, for sure. Even if they tell me no, I'll still show up somehow.
Wonderful. So we'll let Claude drop, and then we're going to talk about redlining a little bit because not for the first time, someone looked at a map and they decided that Travis is a really bad person. Not only that, he's a really bad person. Yeah. He's a really bad person whose bosses need to rein him in.
I'm settling in for this story, Travis. Come on, let's hear it.
I want to know whose bosses are.
So we had an area of Minneapolis, which I don't think it's unknown by national media, that we've had some challenges with crime up here in the last year and a half. So we had a fair number of crews that were working in an area of the city. You know, it was our next logical expansion area. And let's just say the crime element was relatively prevalent there, to where the point that the construction crews were no longer, I didn't feel they were safe to work there. So my thought was abandon all the conduit that we'd put in the ground, move them elsewhere, and then at a future date when things are more calm, we will bring them back and finish up. So we abandoned.
Let's be clear for a second. I mean, I just want to be very clear. Like, you say crime can mean a lot of things. You had multiple instances, and we've talked about it on previous shows, in which your crews were threatened physically in person, and in some cases, people displayed weapons that threatened them, and so that's what is at issue here.
Yeah, handguns, racial slurs, you know, all threats on their lives. I mean, it was very bad. And so I thought I was doing the logical thing. We'll pull the people out of the area. We'll abandon about $500,000 worth of construction that we had completed already. Let it calm down, maybe for a season or two, and then come back and finish up. Well, let's just say some community activists got a hold of that, and of course made
just to be clear, I'm a community activist, so
I know, Chris got a hold of it and made a big stink out of it. But the funny part is, when you're building out this network, I don't know if it's funny, the ironic part is it's a little bit like a whack-a-mole game. So I get called this, that I'm redlining, or I'm doing this, or I'm doing that every year from a different group of folks that don't have the service yet. Then when you build their area, you never hear from them again, and you hear from a new group of people. So this is the current new group of people that are calling us redlining and racist, and you can just go down the list of issues. And I usually engage a little bit, but this time I'm just like, it's not even worth it. So I happened to mention to Mr. Mitchell, and he engaged. And so,
that's what I do.
So off he ran with it, and now we have a very interesting conversation, interesting thread. And I guess none of these people that write these things, which is kind of interesting on these blogs, is they never even asked any details at all. So
no, I think they claim that they did talk to someone at USI who did say that there was issues of personal safety, as well as potential vandalism and a stolen vehicle, maybe.
No,
and
they didn't ask me, and so
no, they didn't ask you. They found you on Reddit. I'm gonna grab this URL and throw it. I should have had this ready. A good host would have done that.
It's an interesting read. So it's
and there's a ton of comments, and it's interesting because, it's people who are honestly trying to understand this stuff. So Doug, I see you in a sec, but I just want to be clear about this. Like the person then was sort of like, but we all know, crime, is crime really a thing? Come on. And that's the part that just kills me, is that there's a certain group of people for whom they're not living in this neighborhood, right? And when they're looking for apartments, they're not looking for it in this neighborhood, and yet they want to pretend that that neighborhood doesn't have crime, when in fact that neighborhood, I'd have to look to be sure, but I'm pretty sure that neighborhood voted for more police presence, which is a whole loaded issue we're not going to get into because it's very complicated. But it's infuriating that people just sort of want to make this a super easy issue, and it's just all because Travis is a bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, Chris ran with it, which I kind of enjoyed. So, it is what it is. These people, they're always angry until they get it, and then they're happy. So it's just, who's your next group of angry people?
Mm-hmm.
And, but there is no, and the other thing I don't think people understand is we're under no obligation to build anywhere.
Right.
And I think that's a real big misunderstanding when these networks are being built out.
This is why I get so angry, and this is why I engage, and this is why my blood pressure is just starting to creep up a little bit, is because these people should be mad. They should be frustrated. The city of Minneapolis should be doing something, and not just oh, the city should solve crime. Sure, that'd be great. If any city could ever solve crime, amazing. It's a multi-thousand-year-old problem, right? Since we've been settled.
But we've talked about this before, and I'd be interested in Kim and Doug's opinion. How it's a big deal to the four of us.
Sorry,
we talk about it all the time.
Just wait. I really want to.
How big of a deal is broadband to the average politician.
Well, that's it, right? Is that the city of Minneapolis has these people who get elected and they're like, oh, we got to make sure that these broadband problems are solved. And like, it'd be really awesome if we could do it while spending less than 22 cents. Like, that's the part that pisses me off, is that like people are upset with like a company that's trying to build out to the entire city rather than holding the elected folks' feet to the fire.
Well, and let's talk about who are the two biggest redliners in the country. Been redliners for 30 years, AT&T and Verizon. They have cherry picked their entire career ever since they stopped being mandated to be a LEC. And so, they, in these cities, there's plenty of places around there that have AT&T fiber, right? They didn't go to those neighborhoods. You know, they don't try to build everywhere. They have no intention of ever building everywhere. They are absolutely redlining, and they're redlining the whole country. I mean, it's, you know, that's just their mode of operation. And so I want
to go to Kim for a second, but this always upsets me. I want to make it clear. When you tell private companies, hey, you know what? Like, if you only want to serve the profitable areas, go ahead and do that. And then you get mad at them for going ahead and serving the profitable areas. Like, I can't get too mad at them, you know, like.
But I think one of the biggest problems that I'm seeing is I work for a governmental agency, and we go and we're going to build out the entire city, and I can get the same calls that Travis is getting of, you should build here. Why are you building here first? And I get this, and I think this is one of the biggest problems that we're seeing is a lot of these projects are going into these very digital redlined areas first, where sometimes it doesn't make the economic sense to go there first, instead of building like these networks where it makes financial sense that you're going to build out the entire community. They make political decisions when they're building out these too, because they hear all this, right? And they hear the rumblings, and you have to make a balance of it, right? When UTOPIA first started, we went into all the cheapest areas to deploy in all of our different cities. It was a huge mistake. And I think that you have to balance this when you're talking from a governmental perspective or you're talking from a private perspective. But I absolutely agree with you, Chris. I think this is one of the things that so we offer at UTOPIA Fiber business class services in anywhere, like in 50 Utah cities. So not just where we have fiber to the home. And we've gotten some cities who've come back to us and said, we don't want to give you permits in our city because you're not going to build out the entire city. And I'm like, how about the other 6 providers who are in this city that you didn't make build out the entire city? Like, it's a very interesting ecosystem out there on this topic.
Now, there's some interesting solutions. Grant County, Washington, building the whole county. They build the richest neighborhood and the poorest neighborhood first, and then they build the second poorest and the second richest. And the people who are complaining, guess who they are? The ones right in the middle.
Well, Doug, tell me that I'm wrong, because you worked on Lafayette, but this is a very real situation in which Lafayette, Louisiana, massive fight between the city's residents and Bell South at the time and Cox Cable, who fought tooth and nail to try and stop Lafayette from building a municipal fiber network. In the course of campaigning to gain support, and after these companies engaged in a racial attack, trying to get people in the black families of Lafayette to oppose the network out of claims that they would never get service, the mayor made a promise that they would build the lowest income areas first, which is where many of the black families were. They did that, and it hurt their business plan. And I think it was a smart decision. Like, I mean, like, it hurt their business plan for a few years, you know, like, but like, nobody actually gets into that. Then once the network starts getting built, people forget, and they're just like, they just want to judge it.
It fell straight on the floor. No one ever talked about it again.
Right? But I mean, that's something they did that, and they made sure there was a low income plan, and it's one of those things that, like, then the whole fight was just about whether or not the network was profitable, and everyone forgot that they'd gone out of their way to make sure that they had a racially equitable approach to it.
Oh, now 3 years in, Cox and AT&T were now complaining that the city wasn't profitable.
Right.
It's like, you can't really have you can't have all these things.
And I just think you can't go into like these things and say you should go here first or you shouldn't here. Like, when we design the network, we look at the cost of the builds, not necessarily who people are. And I think you just have to look at this from a financial sense. But yet again, we're building out the entire networks, and we're usually building them out within a year in a lot of cases. So it's a little bit different than something.
And if you build that fast, it's really not an issue.
Yeah.
So I mean, my answer to this for people who are like, well, Chris doesn't want to be Mr. Libertarian on this issue and like doesn't think we should get mad at companies for redlining. You know, I think the city of Minneapolis and Hennepin County should be finding innovative partnerships of the sort that they might have declined to pursue with a certain person on this show that would have resolved some of these issues.
Cities could stop AT&T from redlining. They could not give them right-of-ways. They could absolutely stop them.
I think they would. Well, when that violates Section 253 of the '96 Act, I mean, they're required. I mean, I think there'd be a lawsuit over it.
There would be a lawsuit, but they could keep them tied up in court for 6 years because they would say you need a citywide franchise, and it would be a long fight.
That's not fair. Those companies would never engage in frivolous lawsuits just to hurt a competitor.
Oh, this would be the lawsuit against them, though. They wouldn't.
No, I'm making a terrible, dumb joke. That wasn't worth it.
I will go with my ultimate thing. If you are building city-owned infrastructure, you don't have this problem. If you're doing it with the private sector, I don't think you can dictate where the private sector goes.
Well, that's why I don't know if Travis appreciates that. I would be like, well, the city of Minneapolis should build North Minneapolis, and then they should lease it to Travis at 0 or some low number, and other companies too. Like, I mean, that's one of the things. Although I think Travis is a great company, like I don't think it should necessarily be exclusive. But like that would be one option to pursue. Maybe Travis wouldn't even like it, but like it would be something that would actually show that they have skin in the game.
They could lease it to me for free, and then I would mark it up and lease it to Travis.
Our model's more in line with Doug's model that he mentioned. You know, basically, we take areas where we can get reasonably high uptake to cover the debt, and then we sprinkle in some areas that are going to take longer to mature. See, what we've learned over the years is it's not like a binary thing. Like this area has no customers and this area has a ton of them. It just takes longer in some areas to attract customers, but it all breaks into the financial model. So you can't go into areas where you have, you know, it's going to take you forever. You're going to be dead in the water. You won't be able to make your debt service, and then you got bigger problems.
But it doesn't matter if you're getting federal funding and you don't care about the take rates, Travis.
Well, that's a whole different model I'm not familiar with, because we actually have to pay our money back, and we have to operate the business and little things like payroll and taxes and da-da-da-da-da. But
well, one other thing that we've also talked about is if the city of Minneapolis wanted to say, you know what, we're going to have free permitting in this area because we really want to improve your business model, because we know it's a neighborhood where it'll take much longer to break even.
Yeah, it's not a big enough number to move the needle that much, though, is the problem.
Okay, good answer, man.
Yeah, when you build these networks out, I mean, this is the reality. The only time I ever hear from the city on these subjects is come election time. And then you get paraded down to the city and you get to talk to the council members about why you're not here, why you're here, why you're there. Then they get reelected. You don't hear from them again for 4 years. So I'm not really sure how, you know, again, I've said we think this is a big problem, which I think it is, but I'm not sure the elected officials who are dealing with all the other issues that they run into, how high this percolates to the top of their agenda. Because the default route here is there's Comcast and CenturyLink are already there.
Right.
Let's clear out. Let's finish up with a question for Doug to start with, which is, should AT&T feel sorry for the cable companies?
Well, apparently, this is the best thing that's happened in the last 5 years. It's my favorite thing. The EVP of technology of AT&T came out and said, I feel sorry for any cable company that competes against us. They're at such a disadvantage. We're going to clean their clock out. I just added the last sentence, but that's what he said. He actually had the I'm sorry for them quote. I think that was a mistake, because that's going to end up in every cable company boardroom, and that's just going to turn up the notch on them. So it's going to put the real pressure on the cable companies. They are all ducking and covering and trying to pretend they don't have an upload problem. They just don't want to publicly acknowledge it.
Yeah.
And AT&T says when they build a network, it takes them about 4 years, but they get about a 50% market penetration. And that's probably close to what Travis is seeing. And so they are cleaning out the cable companies one neighborhood at a time. And so, you know, the public has decided, a lot of the public has now decided fiber's better, just from all the talk that, you know, so when they have the choice, they just think fiber's better.
But here's the thing.
It is better. So,
I just saw like some of the Wall Street chatter, and it was like we're going to do a conference call, or maybe there was a report. I don't know what it was, but it was like, when's cable going to get to 10 gigabits? And I was like, who cares? Like,
who cares?
Like no one is going to like stick with cable because they have faster than a gigabit downloads. Like, that's just not something. Fix your upload problem. That's the thing the investors should be curious about.
Right. Who's ever going to make the cable companies get the 20 megabits upload so it works if you have 2 kids at home? So.
Kim, do you think AT&T should feel sorry for that? It looks like you're talking, but I'm not hearing anything.
Yeah, well, like I talked to myself, I'm Southern. So Joel said that governments can't, I was just commenting to his comment that governments can't do anything. I work for a governmental agency. We're very successful. So I will say that a lot of governmental agencies don't, but I am one. I think that has been very successful. But on the one thing that I do appreciate about what AT&T said is that they are saying is fiber is the way, and like, let's keep going with fiber, and really kind of doubling down on the fiber conversation, which I think is the conversation that needs to be had, and that these other technologies are not nearly as good as what they are. So yes, I think I agree with Doug on everything he said. So I'll agree with Doug and Travis today. Don't expect it.
In 1890, the local governments were real crap at building electrical networks too. Like,
They were bad. They were bad. Yeah.
you know, I mean, like, it's one of those things that that it gets improved upon with time and effort and learning from mistakes and that sort of thing. And so,
but don't you think it was, you know, again, another observation I made when driving across America, all these power lines that are run everywhere. Do you think that you could even rebuild that network today with the bureaucracy that's in place?
No.
I mean, no way. No way. And the other thing is you didn't have 3 other networks or 5 other networks, power networks you were competing with. You had 0. So it's...
I'm working in a county in southern New Mexico where it's going to cost $25,000 per pole to replace them, and they all need to be replaced. It's insane. You cannot replace that network. Yeah. So,
no, let's be clear. Like, that's not, in that case, I think that's not because of like permitting issues and things like that. That's because typical pole replacement, any pole replacement is on the order of $25,000 is my understanding, right? That's more or less like,
but when they're all bad, it's a problem.
Right. No, exactly. But I mean, Travis's point, I think, is that like, whether it's a permitting issue or whether it's environmental, which is also like permitting, but like whether it's like one issue or another related to permitting and the higher cost of labor now. I don't know that we could electrify the country. I mean, it's a lot easier to do it in a depression when people will work for, like a very low wage.
When those poles were built, there is inflation, but they cost about $600, including the labor. Because I've seen the books, back then. And so, because 2 guys would come out with a little rig, take about 2 hours, put the pole up, move on to the next one. They were not expensive to build. Now you have all the rules, all the things.
So I have
there were no rules. There were no rules.
Yeah, on that project, is it just for telecom the poles for, or is there electric on them as well?
Well, there's electric on them. Yeah.
So are they going to have to replace them anyway?
It's owned by a co-op, and the co-op does not want to spend any money on it. They're hoping someone else will fix their poles.
This is why I think New York is reasonable, and I know that it's really complicated when you get into pole attachments. I think
it's hard to ever say New York's reasonable, but you are right on this.
But yeah, I mean, like it's sort of like, I don't think Charter should have the electric ratepayers pay for all their pole replacements, but I also don't think ratepayers should get off scot-free for not having done the maintenance that was required over the years. Now, as we're wrapping up, what was it? There was something I was going to go back to. It was going to be hilarious. Now I've ruined it. You all ruined it. This is awful. Travis, were you going to say a final point there?
I would just, and this would be probably Doug and Kim's, because my perspective is relatively small from the Twin Cities area. But if you ever want to really see how difficult these networks are to build, try permitting a conduit from one side of your city to the other. Just pick a random road and try to permit it. You will be amazed how many different entities there are, how many different processes there are, how many different permit packages you have to get put together for, I think in Minneapolis, there's a dozen different people that own the dirt and a dozen different ways of doing it. Back in the electrification days, it'd be Kim, Doug, and I in a shovel, and down the road we'd go with our horse and our poles.
Part of the reason it's more complicated now is because there was a lot of problems with that approach too. So like, it certainly wasn't a panacea.
Yeah. But there's nobody alive that removes those problems.
When they put up the electric poles, people were bringing you out sandwiches to eat while you did it. I mean, everyone was so happy to see you.
So I do want to say, like, I mean, we included the some of the comments from the nom de plume of Joel Freak, who's a friend, and he's not anti-government. I know that. None of us are anti-government. We're all, I mean, Travis is maybe a little bit, but like No, I know. I'm just teasing you because you're gonna tease me about Ajit Pai and how great he was with Wi-Fi 6 and any second now. So, but like the point is that government can do better. We need it to do better, and that's the thing is that like we see through like whether it's Utopia, which is a remarkable shift from having made every mistake, some of them twice, to steal Kim's line, and getting it right now, and the fact that investors are just throwing money at her to live a remarkable lifestyle, just jetting around.
But I would bet that Utopia operates more like a private company than a government entity. I bet.
We do, and I think that. But you have government. We have most people who work here came from the private sector. But I agree that with Joel, not to say I agree that I work for a governmental agency. I was kind of joking when I said that earlier, and that we're successful. But I also agree that a lot of this money will be wasted because people who are going into the government, if they are good people who are going into this space right now, they're probably going to be trying to get poached from the private sector. And so who is going into these networks in the government right now? And do they have the skill set? So I don't disagree with what is being said either.
So with that, I mean, this has been one of my favorite shows. I feel like I might have finally figured out how to do something right occasionally. So that's nice. Feeling pretty good about that. We do not have a show next week because I can't imagine that anyone would have anything to say if I'm not there, and I'm going to be in Portland for Net Inclusion from NDIA, the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. It's going to be a great event. I believe it's available online as well. It's going to be some great panels.
You don't trust the three of us to do a show without you?
I'm afraid that it would go really well is what it comes down to. So we're going to come back in 2 weeks, and I have a whole bunch of guest ideas and stuff like that, but we haven't nailed down everything yet. But I'll be in touch with you, Doug, and Kim. Travis, I'm going to give you a week off, and looking forward to when we all get back together. Thank you so much for tonight.
Thank you.
And that'll be right around the time that I'm losing the bet officially. So maybe we'll do something in person, Travis, and I'll have to eat wings publicly or something that I've paid for.
Well, I'll be in San Diego or Vegas or Salt Lake, so I'll let you know where to fly into.
Well, if it's Salt Lake, then I'll consider it because that's a Delta hub.
They would all three be together.
Yeah.
We got to bring Henry too.
Are you a Delta snob? Is that what you're saying, or what?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
I have a 6-year-old, and I leave my wife alone way too much. That if something went wrong, I need to get back pronto. And Delta has 1 million flights into the MSP every day, so I need to.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So with that, I mean, this is really important stuff to have at the end of the show. It's been a wonderful episode of Connect This.